looks like it's about 11 o'clock. We can get started with our next session here. So, reminder again real quick, we do have surveys on each of the tables, so at the end of the session, if you fill those out and leave them on the table, I'll come by and pick them up. And then right after this session, lunch will be in this room or the next room. They'll open up the doors shortly afterwards. So, our next speaker on the topic of financing residential renewable energy projects, case studies. So we have Sara Baldwin from Utah Clean Energy. Sara manages the Solar Salt Lake Partnership Program as a part of the U.S. Department of Energy Solar America Cities Initiative, where she coordinates with Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, and other partners to remove barriers to solar energy. Under Sara's lead, the Solar Salt Lake project has earned a Barrier Buster Award and a Mountain Mover Award for the Department of Energy. Sara is also actively involved in the various clean energy policy initiatives utility regulatory proceedings, including the current utility solar incentive work group. So if we can welcome Sara up here.
Thank you. Is that, just unclipped myself. Is that loud enough for everybody? Can you hear me? Great. Well, good morning, and thank you all for participating in this session. Let me begin before I start by providing a few caveats. I am not a Wall Street banker. I don't really deal directly in the finance community, although I work a lot collaboratively with a lot of folks in that community. I'm also not a tax attorney, so I can't answer any of those questions for you. And also, this is an extremely interesting but also very complicated topic, especially with a pretty diverse audience. You never know the background of those in the room and how many of you are renting, how many of you are homeowners, how many of you are doing research, how many of you are Wall Street bankers or tax attorneys. So with those caveats, I will begin, and I hope that I'll be able to at least provide you with a good overview of what's happening in this realm in Utah and at the national level, both in the traditional sector as well as more on the innovative model side. So just an overview. We'll give you a quick introduction of Utah Clean Energy, a quick history lesson, a little overview of why our buildings matter in case anyone forgot why we're all here today, and then I'll dive right into the meat of the topic, and then a couple concluding thoughts on ways that you can be empowered going forward in this financial arena. So Utah Clean Energy, we've been around since 2001. Quick raise of hands for those who are familiar with our organization. Nice, that's good. I always like to ask because sometimes the room is a completely new room, and I never know how many people out there actually know we exist. We tend to fly under the radar a little bit. So we do a lot of nonpartisan policy and regulatory work to remove barriers to energy efficiency and renewable energy, primarily with the intention of creating markets. So we may be working on federal policies, state policies, local policies, or regulatory dockets that remove the barriers to you being able to go and purchase solar for your home and finance it, or a commercial entity doing the same, or putting up a wind farm or what have you. We are solutions oriented, so we fight for what we want to see. We don't typically fight against things. We do a lot of education and outreach, and I encourage you to follow us on the Twitter and the Facebook thing. I'm supposed to say that, so I'm trying to get our Twitter feed up. Anyway, so a quick history lesson. Raise of hands. How many of you know who these two gentlemen are? Yes?
Let's see, Thomas Edison on the left and Alexander Graham Bell on the right.
Correct. So Thomas Edison on the left and Alexander Graham Bell on the right, for those who couldn't hear. Now these two gentlemen were contemporaries in the 1800s. They both did a few important things that changed all of our lives today and have made impressive leaps and bounds in not only the energy and communications sector, but it basically set the stage for our current economy and communications paradigm, with the exception of the fact that one of these gentlemen, if they came back today in a time capsule or a time machine, he would recognize almost everything of what he put together back in the 1800s. We haven't really changed our energy system all that much. The other gentleman probably would be a little confused about what these little devices are that we stare at constantly. And the fact that they can transmit information and music and make phone calls and Skyping and all that. So I put this up there just to sort of remind us that we have a long way to come still in the energy sector in getting us to a new paradigm. And renewables are part of that new paradigm. So is efficiency, so is smart grids, so is energy storage, alternative fuels. All of it is part of that new paradigm that we are working actively to speed that transition. We're pretty good on the telecommunications side, although the cool thing about where we're heading is there is going to be an increasing interface between telecommunications, smart technologies, and our energy technologies, and that's where we're really going to become more empowered as energy consumers. So that was your quick history lesson. This is just a reminder of why our buildings matter. A lot of people think our energy issues really relate to our transportation sector or our industrial sector. Both of those certainly are part of our energy portfolio, but in the end, it is our homes and commercial buildings that use almost half of the energy consumed in the United States. So figuring out how to use less energy, use it intelligently, and after you've done all the efficiency and all of the intelligent habit-changing, behavior-changing on the energy side, renewables, then add to that and create the ideal near net zero facility, net zero energy. And so in terms of what's powering our buildings, what's behind that 48%, well, we have mostly fossil fuels, and this is a US figure. I didn't provide this for Utah, but it's similar without the nuclear. We don't have any nuclear powering any facilities here in Utah. But mostly coal, natural gas, liquid fossil fuels, and renewables are making about 8%, and that includes large hydro. So a small chunk of that is geothermal, wind, and solar. And so going down yet another level, our homes, and this is the average Utah home energy portfolio. If we're looking at where we're using our energy the most, space heating, appliances and lighting, and cooling make up the top three. Unless you have several plasma TVs that are not Energy Star rated, in which case that's equivalent to putting multiple refrigerators in your home. And so if you have multiple refrigerators plus multiple plasma TVs, well, then your portfolio mix is looking a little different here. So this is all just context for the discussion we're about to have, but also none of us know what the future looks like. We all have our ideas, we all have our fears and our hopes and our ambitions, but at the end of the day, all of our crystal balls are pretty much broken and cloudy. We can't see what's going to happen, but we do know that there are trends in energy, and certainly there are ups and downs, as with everything, but the trend for electricity and natural gas is that the energy rates and the price for which the price that we pay for energy is on the rise. And right now we're in a natural gas excess situation, so our natural gas is not as high as it was a couple years ago, but we tend to forget when things are really good how really bad they were just a few years or months ago. And so the reason that renewables have such a hard time in our society getting a real hold in our economy is that we have that memory lapse almost every other year. And if we could just continue to look backwards and also consider backward data while looking forward, Renewables make a ton of sense for so many reasons, because you can lock in the price of energy from a wind, solar, geothermal plant, and you know exactly what you're going to be paying for 30 years. You know exactly what you're going to be paying for 30 years. You cannot say that about most other energy sources. So that's why renewables have such an awesome opportunity, but also why they're difficult to get hold in our society that tends to think in 5-hour increments. So distributed generation is also just one piece of the puzzle. So a lot of people come to me and they say, I want to do solar on my home. And I'm like, that's great. Where have you done your investments for efficiency? Because that's where you're going to get huge bang for your buck in energy savings right away. And Alex Scott just went over a lot of the efficiency that's going on, so I'm not going to go into that. But solar or wind or geothermal, they all play a part in an ultimate puzzle that needs to be put together carefully. If you're investing in a huge solar system to serve an inefficient home, you're wasting your money. And you should be doing all that you can first to change your behaviors, reduce the energy you use, and then at that point, renewables do start to make a lot of sense. And I consider myself to be a good case study. Granted, I'm sort of an anomaly because this is my job and I'm sort of eating, living, sleeping, breathing this. But my home energy consumption monthly is less than 200 kilowatt hours a month. And so I could get away with putting a 1 or 1.5 kilowatts solar system on my home. And in today's economy, that would not cost me very much. After incentives, it's even more economical. But if you need to put 7 to 8 kilowatts on your home, different scenario, different financing prospects. So, I put that out there because those are all important things to keep in mind. Hence, the what to keep in mind slide. In addition to what I just said, you'll need to understand your utility and what type of net metering and interconnection standards they offer, because especially if you're doing solar, although also with wind. These two pieces play a big role in the overall financing picture. If you're only getting basically a wholesale credit for any excess generation that you provide to the utility, and you're paying retail, well, you can do the math. That's not going to give you the faster payback as if you're doing kilowatt hour for every month. So net metering, sorry, I just dove right into that. Net metering is the contract that you have with your utility when you do put your own renewables on your home to get credit for any excess generation that you're providing when you're not using it. So when you're gone for the day or you're just being really efficient and you're not needing as much energy, that energy goes back to the grid, serving your neighbors, providing energy to a stressed system. It has value, and you should be getting value for that. So you should be understanding net metering and interconnection. Those are two key pieces. Also, utility incentives. You'll want to know what's out there and what's available, and I'll talk a little bit about Reclamant Power's incentives later. State and federal incentives. Utah, we have a 25% up to $2,000 for state incentive for renewables, and the federal incentive is 30% with no cap until 2016. So now is a really ideal time, while these incentives are available, to consider those investments. And we have till 2016, so we still have a little bit of time. But as soon as those are set to expire, you can kind of expect them to either decline or go away altogether. So the cost of energy today, what you're paying today, versus what you're going to be paying 10, 15 years from now. Again, this goes back to what I was just saying, that you can't make all of your decisions based on today's reality. Even though you don't have a crystal ball, you can certainly do some math, assume some escalation rates, and assume that your prices will continue to rise. Because I have yet to hear any utility tell me that prices are going to go down in the future. It's guaranteed. It's not true. Your current usage and your projected usage. So what are you using today? Are you a young family with 0 children, 1 children, planning to have 7? That's going to change your energy usage. You want to take that into account. Or are you a really inefficient home today that you can do some insulation, get a better furnace, get a better air conditioner, then you're going to use less? That's also going to affect your ultimate decision making. Do you have a new home or an old home? Because sometimes you're going to have to do upgrades to an old home that you wouldn't expect to have to do. But also, your new home may not be built to code. Even though we do have an established code, it's only the 2006 code. There was an effort during the legislative session to increase energy code standards to the 2009 code that failed. We're about to see the 2012 code come down from the code pipeline. So your new home, even if you bought it a couple years ago, may not be built even to the 2006 code. So you'll want to make sure you know what your home is doing. The costs for a new construction project versus a retrofit are vastly different, especially if you're talking about ground source geothermal or passive solar or any of the built-in design features. You can make them much more cost-effective in new construction than a retrofit. Do you have concerns about air quality? Are you considering an electric vehicle in the future? If so, you may want to consider how your home energy system can play into that solution going forward. What are your resources? Do you have a big shade tree on your south-facing roof? If so, solar may not be for you. If you have a house that's in a great canyon, you get good canyon winds, great. Does your city allow that? Another question. So, not always easy, right? This is not an easy process, but if you can start thinking about these things now, you're setting yourself up better for when you want to make a call to a contractor. You've done some homework and done some research. And then lastly, but certainly not least, and this is individual, this is nothing that you can ask your neighbor about or your colleagues or coworkers. This is completely internal. But what are your values, your goals, and your priorities for your home and for the future? And that will differ for everyone. Some people will be more interested in energy security, making sure they've got a backup system. Other people will just be wanting to do this because they realize that they can be part of the solution and their home can be part of reducing or overall building sector consumption. And on and on and on. It will vary. Okay, so traditional financing options, we all know what they are, and quite frankly, they are still not really that well suited for renewable energy financing. And I'll explain why in a minute, but it never hurts to ask. And in fact, what I tell people is go ask your bank what options they provide to you as a homeowner to do renewables and efficiency on their home. Because if they don't get the question, they won't understand that there's customer demand out there for that type of product. And more banks and credit unions and financial institutions are starting to understand that there is a market demand, there are people who want this, but they need to hear it. Alex mentioned the same as cash loans. I'll talk about those in just a minute. But any of these, provided you've got the right scenario, can potentially get you where you need to be for financing renewable energy. However, this is where the catch is. Your average loan size is going to be relatively small compared to the loan transaction cost potentially. So that's going to be a challenge. There is not a developed secondary market for these types of loans for renewables or efficiency, and that's definitely a huge barrier at this point. Although I'm working closely with folks at the federal level who are trying to figure all of this out, and that's beyond my area of expertise. There are so many variations among state programs and local programs that banks, credit unions, financial institutions, they have a hard time figuring out a more standard, uniform process or product to comply with all of these different programs, which have developed, quite frankly, in the absence of the availability of traditional financing. So it's an interesting catch in some ways. There are still legal and regulatory barriers and there will continue to be those until more groups like ours are out there fighting to remove them. There's no standard loan product, and because it's more of an emerging market, it's still considered to be a risky market. So that's why traditional financing has a harder time getting us there. However, in the two main categories of loan products, you've got your unsecured and your secured. Your secured are going to be your higher volume loans, and they'll either be secured with a tax or other lien, and they're often well suited for whole house renovations, which include solar. So if you're going to improve your home for resale value and you want to tack on some solar, that's probably a good way to go. However, there's the limited secondary market, as I mentioned. The unsecured loans, these are higher volume, low value loans. They're sort of the customer credit model. And the underwriting is typically based on debt to income ratio, credit scores, and these are becoming more and more common, and more contractors are starting to use these in order to provide the services to their customers. So if you're doing a home equity line of credit, you're going to have typically a variable rate product. You're going to have to have some equity in your home. This is a problem for newer homeowners. And it's definitely more difficult to access now. So what was once potentially a decent option, now not as much. Your consumer credit, this is a credit card basically from your homes or Lowe's Depot. Lowe's Depot. I think I just created a new business. They probably wouldn't like that. And then it's discounted. So EnerBank is an industrial bank. They're actually owned by an energy company. And what they do is they work directly with contractors. So the same way when you go to Home Depot and you want to buy a washing machine set and you can't pay for it all up front, but you can pay for it within 18 months. The same exact thing, and they offer that for efficiency products and residential renewable energy products. The crux, of course, is finding a contractor who works with EnerBank to do this, or another similar organization that offers similar products. So this would be one where, as a customer, you should ask your contractor, do you work with an EnerBank or an organization that offers same as cash financing or low payment loans? Because not all contractors are in that realm yet. But again, if they hear that that's something that their customers need, that could be something that they bring to the table. These are going to be more dependent on your FICO scores and your debt-to-income ratio. So what EnerBank has told me is they're out there providing loans to people who can't get them through traditionally financing mechanisms, but they're not out there giving loans to people who can't get a loan anywhere. They're not in the business of giving loans to people who can't pay them back. It's not a good business practice. So anyway. So that's all the traditional stuff, and quite frankly, it's something that a lot of people are working on and trying to fix, but it's not going to happen quickly. So there are some innovative models that are much more exciting and are happening now. One is the community bulk purchase model. Raise of hands if you've heard of the solarized Portland model. Okay, cool. So this is a highly successful model. It's been proven in many states. Portland was one that sort of pioneered it, but it's been done many other places. It's basically designed to help homeowners overcome the logistical and financial hurdles of going solar, but it could also be applied to energy efficiency. It could be applied to, in the right scenario, ground source geothermal or heat pumps. Could be applied to a lot of different things. But basically the idea is you get a bunch of people who want to do something collectively. They can either live next to each other or not. It doesn't necessarily matter. But you have a concerted effort of individuals interested in going solar. They unite and they tackle the solar process as a team. They designate a steering committee, and they have that steering committee put out an RFP, or a request for proposals, and they get bids from contractors. And the contractor comes in and says, well, since you have 300 people, I can give you all the same price at a discounted rate. And you can also do it with tiers. So as you get more people coming on, you get even more discounts. And you also get quality assurance because a contractor who's going to come and do 300 homes or 150 or even 20 has should have a vested interest in doing every one of those homes as best as he or she can possibly do. Because there's going to be a mass movement and also probably a lot of attention and possibly media around the event or around the effort. So you got some quality assurance there. Salt Lake Community Solar is a new pilot effort designed to do just this. We are just getting started, and it's we've got a steering committee. We've held a meeting. We've got about 150 interested individuals, although we're planning to get more. So if you're interested in this type of initiative, I encourage you to check us out. We're on the internet. But here's an example, just to provide some numbers for you. So back in 2009, solar prices were much higher than they are today. So keep that in mind, as reflected here. But back in 2009, the average price per kilowatt in Portland was hovering in that 9,500 range. And through the Solarize Portland model, they were able to drop it, well over $2,000 per kilowatt. And as more and more homes started to participate, the price continued to decline. Here's another way to look at it. In kilowatts, they got 25 kilowatts, it was $7.20. At 50, it was $7.10. 75, 7. So declining about 10 cents a watt over as the number of kilowatts increased. And we're starting about, sorry, my little pointer is being a little, okay, there we go. We're actually somewhere in this range, we'll say 6,500 for the sake of conversation, but in Utah, the average installed price is about 6,500 per kilowatt. So we're already starting below where they started. So the potential for discounts are significant. Now a lot of people are probably like, all right, that's Portland, they're Oregon, they're super progressive, everybody knows that. Curtis can attest to that. And, it's just not going to work here. I'm sorry. Good luck. Well, here's the reality. So in this particular area of Portland, southeast Portland, in 2004, 2005, 2006, there really weren't that many solar projects coming online. There were great incentives, people were interested, but it just wasn't happening. Then they launched Solarize, and the number shot up significantly, tripling. Then 2010, tripling again. So it actually could work and will work here. And Portland has a reputation, but they may not always comply with their reputation. And then this is just some more dollar figures to throw at you, and these are completely theoretical, so as noted by this disclaimer here. But if you have an example without community bulk purchase, and you say you want 2 kilowatts on your home, the installed cost is, say, $7,000 for the sake of easy math. Your upfront cost is $14,000, your state tax credit's $2,000, your federal tax credit's $3,600, final out-of-pocket $8,400. It's a good chunk of change, right? So let's say with community bulk purchase, we're able to get it down, say, $2,000 less per kilowatt. You get it down to $10,000 up front with the bulk purchase price, and then take the state tax credit of $2,000, and then take the federal tax credit of $2,400. And the reason that's different is because it's a 30%, not a fixed rate. Your final out-of-pocket is $5,600, which is much more palatable. I mean, it's still thousands of dollars, don't get me wrong, but much more palatable and much easier to see a return on your investment and a return on your payment, a faster payback. Okay, so that's one innovative model that's happening pretty cool. The Energy Smart Loan Program is also another really innovative model that Salt Lake County launched just last year using stimulus money. So they didn't have a ton, but they did do a $1 million pilot program for efficiency and renewable energy upgrades. And basically, they partnered with Community Development Corporation, GE Capital, Morgan Stanley, and used some ARA funds, and were able to leverage all those partners and resources to offer 5% interest rate loans for efficiency and renewable energy upgrades on homes. They got about 80 efficiency loans and about 3 solar loans with that money. A lot of people came to the door saying, I want solar. And then through the process they realized, never mind, I want windows, insulation, you know, a new furnace, the things that I need to do first. They're actually hoping to and planning to expand this pilot program in the near future, and they're going to be going before the Debt Review Council to offer up that proposal. So for those of you who are in Salt Lake County, stay tuned. For those of you who are not in Salt Lake County, this is a replicable model that could be spread anywhere across the state in any county or jurisdiction that's interested in doing this. And the means by which to fund the loan can vary, and I'll talk about that. This is sort of an aside, but we're in the process of working to expand Rocky Mountain Power's solar incentive program. They have a pilot program that's been in the works, or been on the books for 5 years. It's very, very tiny. It's 114 kilowatts per year. Excuse me, 107 kilowatts per year. So not enough to fund more than about 30 systems annually. And we've actually, Utah Clean Energy, through several processes and analyses, have shown that this rebate program can be a cost-effective resource for the utility and for ratepayers. In other words, for them to give you $1.25 a watt to put solar on your roof, up to a certain amount, is a cost-effective resource that makes sense in their portfolio. We did some analyses with their integrated resource plan, and it selected all of the available solar. So we have reason to think, and good reason to think, with data to back it up, that this program can be expanded significantly. So it's underway. Stay tuned. We hope to have news on this in the next several months. Okay, so some of the other models out there. Solar leasing. There are a ton of companies that operate in other states that come to your house and they set up a lease arrangement whereby they lease your roof, they put solar on it, they own it, they operate it, and then they charge you a fixed fee based on a number of factors and the amount of incentives that they can get and the energy rate that you pay and escalation rates, etc. So this model works really well in some markets. It's not yet available really in this market, although Vivint Solar is down in Utah County. They're looking closely at this model for Utah, and they're doing it in other states. The PPA model, power purchase agreement model, it's the same thing, except your payment is based on actual output from the system. So it's a little different than a fixed fee and a little bit more potentially reliable in terms of what you're getting out of the deal. However, that would require a policy and or regulatory change in Utah. We tried to make it happen a few years ago, and we ended up with having to scale back a little bit. But we're not giving up. Virtual net metering, this is an arrangement where you could have a central station, whatever, a wind farm, a solar farm, a geothermal plant, whatever, on a landfill or in an abandoned brownfield. And then the residents of a community can just buy into that project and receive the benefits on their bill as though it were on their own home. It's not really financing, but it's a unique way of getting renewables and getting the benefits of renewables to a homeowner. New homes actually can have renewables on them, built in. In fact, several, okay, let me take that back. One home builder in Utah is offering as a standard product their homes that come with solar or geothermal or both. They're out there and they're offering them at very competitive rates. They're also very efficient. I'm not going to say their names. You probably all know who they are, but I'm not their salesperson, so I won't. But also, if you're building a new home, ask your contractor to investigate the possibility of a geothermal heat pump or a solar system or passive solar design, or any of the above. Because unless you ask them, they probably won't go there on their own. And again, financing that through a big loan that you're already taking out for the home, much easier than doing it after the fact. There is a solar appraisal tool. So a lot of people think, okay, well, what if I do this to my house and then I can't really resell the home and get the value back from what I've put in because people don't recognize it, the appraiser community doesn't. It is a conundrum, which is why the Sandia National Labs worked with folks at Daybreak and Kennecott Land and Utah Clean Energy and some others to develop a model solar appraisal tool to be able to figure out what a comparable is for solar and efficient homes. It's very user-friendly, and they're starting to shop this around to the appraiser community, and ideally this will be part of continuing education going forward for the appraisal community and the real estate community. That is definitely a barrier that we need to overcome, but it's now out there, so we're overcoming it. And then PACE is the last thing, and Alex talked about that a little bit. I'm not going to go into detail, but there is a rulemaking on PACE that's happening at the end of this month. So public comments are being accepted through March 26th to address the FHFA ruling on PACE that basically shut the whole program down nationwide. And this program has the potential to be extremely groundbreaking and really change the paradigm for financing. It was working and is working in many places. In Utah, we're not going to be able to do it until there is resolution at the federal level. So I encourage you, if you're interested in this issue, there's also a bill that's sort of languishing, as with every other bill in Congress right now. But on the rulemaking, this is a separate non-congressional issue that can actually make a huge impact on whether or not PACE is allowed to move forward. Okay, so there are a number of financing program models that are being developed by really smart people, and the idea is to get these programs to the people in the near future. You'll need to, if you're representing a local government or you work with local governments or you want to see one in your government or your community, you'll definitely want to make it a simple, easy to use, low hassle program, removing the first cost barrier, balancing credit management with amortization, and making smaller monthly payments versus larger monthly payments. And attracting capital to these programs is key, but as we've seen in the Energy Smart Loan Program, that is possible, and there is an appetite for it among certain financial institutions. There's also the possibility of using qualified energy conservation bonds, which is something I'm not going to get into in detail, but basically there is an allocation to every state and certain communities in the state for these qualified energy conservation bonds. They're low interest bonds, and they actually can be used to fund a loan loss reserve program for a PACE-like model in communities. So I realize that just got really wonky really fast. I apologize. It's just the nature of this. But I'm happy to answer questions after the fact. So this is just a good example of any of the variations out there that a program could take on. And the reason that it's so complex and so difficult to get a grasp on is there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of opportunities and a lot of possibilities, but a lot of people that you got to get on board simultaneously. So for example, you'll need to get capital sources from banks, credit unions, community development funds, bonding, federal funds, other monies from treasury allocations. You can also do it through utilities. These are the folks who are lending, but you also may need an enhancement program whereby you're securing those loans for those lenders because it is still emerging and risky. In which case you may want to set up a loan loss reserve program where a bank lends, and then if 5% default, there's an escrow fund sitting there to give them a portion of that back so that they're not having to absorb all of that loss. But you do want to still have them have a little skin in the game so they do it properly. You could do debt service reserve, a loan insurance, subloans. Any of these would work. They all work a little differently. And then you're going to want another security for making sure that people pay what they said they're going to pay, and that could be a tax lien, it could be a fixture lien, it could be something on the meter, or it could be unsecured. And then the means by which people repay these loans, you can do it on the bill, you can do it through their property tax, you can do it through another fee, you can do it through a third party. Possibilities are really limitless, which is why it's really complex. So, concluding thoughts, I think it's really easy for people in this arena to feel completely disempowered and just throw their hands up in the air. There's nothing I can do. Oh well. But I would encourage you to think differently. And Utah Clean Energy is working proactively. We have funding and some support to work on this, but we definitely need more. We need support. We need voices. We need ideas. So do be in touch with us. And think locally, because community initiatives are way easier than anything at the federal or state level. So if you can have a champion in your county government implement an Energy Smart Loan program or a loan loss reserve program, that is going to be really tangible for you as a constituent and also much easier to get through the process. As a consumer, as a customer, as a voter, you should be asking for and demanding more options in this arena. Because at this point, there is not enough of that vocal demand. There's a lot of complaining on the sides to people who don't make decisions, but vocal demand to people who make decisions is a huge deal in this arena. People need to understand our elected officials, our utilities, our consumer advocates, what have you. They need to understand that people want this. It doesn't mean that you have to commit to doing it tomorrow. It just means, hey, I want this. At some point in time, please help me. So ask for these options. Your bank, too. Also another key constituent of yours that you should be talking to. And then lastly, you can consider launching a community bulk purchase program in your neighborhood, in your church, in your community. And this is something that's very tangible and can be done. The cool thing about the Solarized Portland model is that they have spelled out in great detail all of the steps that they've gone through. They have sample RFPs, they have tools, they have resources. So this is something that you can take and replicate easily. Well, more easily than doing it from ground zero and starting from the very beginning. Some more resources for those interested, and I think that concludes my presentation. So take any questions either up here or out there. So thank you. Yes?
Okay, so in terms of the virtual net metering programs, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you get rebates for doing that? And also, if it's run by the city, can you get rebates even if they're administrating it?
Okay, so the question was, with virtual net metering, can you get rebates for participating, and if it's run by a city, can you get rebates from the city or from?
They're administrative program, but private individuals are paying in.
Uh-huh.
Is there a way to structure that to get the rebates?
Okay, so I'll answer the first question, or the first part of the question. So in Utah, we're actually very unique in that our legislature passed a bill a couple years ago that allows virtual net metering for municipal utilities and rural co-ops if they want to. And basically, St. George is doing this with their SunSmart program. So anyone who participates in the SunSmart solar program and is virtually net metering, they can also take advantage of the rebates that St. George has to offer, and they can also take advantage of the tax credit, state tax credit, that Utah offers. Unfortunately, the federal tax credit is not applicable. There is a bill moving in the federal hallways to allow people to take advantage of the federal tax credit for virtual net metering projects. But again, that's with many things sort of in the wings, and I think we'll see movement on that after the election. Everything after the election. And then the city itself would not necessarily be able to take advantage of rebates because they are not the recipient of the power. So it's structured such that only people who are participating and paying in would be able to get the rebates. The city or municipality would not be able to. Any other questions? Yes.
Are there any stipulations on location of panels to get grants and tax credits?
So the question was, are there any stipulations on the location of panels to get grants and tax credits? And the answer is yes. For the state tax credits, they outline in their rules and eligibility all of the requirements for the panel location, and I believe it's 180 degrees within due south. You can get tax credits.
I mean, as far as logistically speaking, on the house or on a freestanding.
Yeah, it's not, well, okay, so as long as you're oriented properly towards the sun,
Right.
you're not doing it on the north side of the house. I've seen that actually, it's bizarre. But man, they look good. The south part, as long as they're oriented, towards the sun properly, it doesn't matter where on your home you put it, unless you have an HOA or you live in a historic district or you have city ordinances that prevent you from putting it in certain locations. So that really is a local level question that I don't know. Any other questions? Yes?
So if we were going to hire a contractor to come out and put some panels on the roof, like we live in Lehigh, would you need to get, and Lehigh does their own electricity.
Okay.
Does the contractor talk to Lehigh how to wire it into their grid so that it comes off and they understand? Is that something as a homeowner you would do yourself, or the contractor take care of it for you?
Most contractors should take care of that for you, and my recommendation is to be involved in the process insofar as you're able and willing, just so that, yeah. But yeah, most contractors go through all of interconnection, net metering, and they'll even apply for a lot of the incentives for you. So, yes.
On the bulk purchasing program, do necessarily the houses have to be in a line, or
No.
can they be?
Yeah, they can be scattered. That picture was just to provide you a visual aid of what we're talking about. But with the Salt Lake Community Solar Program, for example, the participants at this point are from really all over the valley. So,
How big of an area?
well, that's actually a really good question we're trying to figure out as we're going through this process. And I've spoken with several contractors, and I've asked them, so, what are the boundaries that would allow you to still provide the discount? And they've said, as long as it's within a reasonable service area, like you couldn't have Salt Lake County and Utah County. That's, too far to drop. But we're planning on having it within the entire county. So, unless they tell us otherwise, in which case we'll narrow it. So, yeah. All right, well, thank you all so much for your questions and participation. If you have other questions, I'll be up here for a while. So, thanks.
Leave your surveys on the table. I'll come by and pick them up.